Hey guys, Constance here from Cosmopolitan Cornbread. So I thought I would come out here into the garden and do a little bit of a post-season tour. I did a pre-season tour back in the early spring, and so I thought I would just come out here and share what's going on, what everything is looking like at this point, and yeah, so let me take a sip of my coffee and we'll get started. Alrighty, so as you can see, there's my invader. I caught you. Go on, girl. Get out of here. That crazy whiting has been getting in here in the garden. Whitings can fly like crazy, as you just saw. And you know, we've had this big old fence around the garden for 2 years now. Have had no issues with chickens getting in here until her. Alright, so let's get back to what's going on out here in the garden. So as you can see, most everything has been getting cleared out. There's still a lot of stuff that I've just let go to seed, but I've been coming through here and just cleaning out. Now, something I am excited about is the yarrow that I had growing here has flowered. Look at all these beautiful, delicate little flowers. Now there's tons of basil still out here in the garden that I just left go to seed. This down here is actually oregano. It's a dwarf oregano. That over there is some Tulsi Basil. Yes, Dapper Dan. There is lots of basil out here. Much of it was volunteers from last year, some of it was not. Now over here on this trellis, I had come out here and I had planted peas quite some time ago, and those right there are pretty much it. So there's not really enough to do anything with them. I think the issue was them right there. Now, the little Japanese bantams have a coop and run that is inside the garden fence over there in the corner. And generally what happens is in the springtime, I keep the door closed, I confine them to the run. They're very unhappy with me for a few days until they get used to the idea. But I do that when I come out here and I plant the spring garden, because there's little baby delicate plants, there's seeds and all of that. And so I make them stay inside the run until the plants have gotten established. Once they are established, then I open the door and I let the little bantams come through here and do whatever they want. Because at that point, they're not going to hurt the garden. They're not going to hurt anything. They don't scratch as aggressively as a full-size chicken does. And so that's just what I do. Well, for the fall garden, to be honest, I didn't even really think of it. And so I have a feeling that the reason I didn't get much of anything was because I didn't confine the bantams. Because we were still watering, we were still maintaining as we had been, but nothing really happened. So I think the couple of pea plants that I got are just, I think it's the ones the chickens missed. So it is what it is. Now over here, right down in this area, I actually have something that I planted, and I don't think I ever talked about it. These are Egyptian walking onions, and I was super excited to find these, the little starts, or the little baby ones, at a farm supply store here that I discovered a couple months ago. The very first time I went in there, they had these Egyptian walking onions, and I had been very intrigued by them. I had read about them, but I'd never seen them for sale anywhere. And so I immediately bought a bag of them, brought them home, and stuck a bunch of them in the ground in spaces that I had nothing planted. And the reason these are called walking onions is because the top develops the flower and it gets heavy and it gets big, and then it falls over, it falls to the ground, and wherever it falls to the ground, it takes root and it starts a new series of plants. And it'll just kind of continue doing that step by step, and as though it's walking. And so they're called Egyptian walking onions. Now you can use them sort of like scallions or chives, and they just add a great flavor to whatever you are cooking them with. So now over in here you can see where I have pulled out a lot of my drip line. It's still all attached to the main line that crosses the path inside the PVC and works its way through the garden. The reason I'm pulling all of this up is because we had a couple of them spring leeks get damaged for whatever reason. And when we planted the garden, we put down the drip line, we put in all of the plants, and then we covered the lines with mulch. And we decided that we really didn't like that method, and that in the future we would lay down the line over the mulch. That way we could see the lines and we could see if there was any sort of issue with it being pinched somewhere, or if there was a leak or anything like that. So I have it all pulled back. We'll go through and kind of look, make sure there's no damage to any of them, replace any that might need replacing, and we will use the majority of it again next year. But the drip line system for us was just a game changer. It saved me so much time out here in the garden, and I'm so glad we made this investment. And I want to try and work a way to install it for the raised bed garden out front as well. Over in here you can see tons of basil. Now most of this is Tulsi basil, and it all came back from last year. Now last year, right in there, I had planted purple opal basil, that deep purple basil. This is what came back, and I think that this is actually a hybrid of Tulsi basil and purple basil, because clearly it's got the purple in it. But it doesn't smell like your regular purple basil. It has that sort of sweet Tulsi smell. So I think that's what that is. It's pretty cool. And it smells like Tulsi. Yeah. So every bit of that was volunteers from last year. Now over in here, I finally have my Mexican sunflowers. I had planted these several times because of the slugs eating all of my baby plants. So they're finally flowering, which is great because it gives a little bit of cheer out here in the garden when, you know, most everything else is gone. So it's lovely to be able to look out here and see these. And speaking of volunteers, over here I've still got a bunch of Tabasco peppers. These were all volunteers that came up from last year. And then over here, this is the Roselle that, like the Mexican sunflower, I had to plant several times because of the slugs eating all of my seedlings. These are beautiful, and I'm so glad that they have finally grown and just flourished. They are related to hibiscus. They have these beautiful, delicate flowers, and then the pods that you see here on the stems, these are used to make tea, Roselle tea, and it's wonderful. So now right behind me you can see what is left of the okra patch. Like a lot of things, I've just let it go to seed. I've let the pods dry out and all of that. We have actually decided that we're not going to plant okra again because, to be quite honest, we just don't eat it enough, and it grows so prolifically here, and it's so heat resistant, and it likes, you know, depleted soil. So this area right here, I did not amend it at all this year when I planted that, just like the Roselle and the chamomile that I had over here. So it grows really well, but we just don't eat it that much. Now that does not mean that there won't be okra in our garden again. There will most definitely be okra making appearances. I'm just not going to plant any. And I know I'm going to have some because of this. Because all of these pods that I have just left here to dry are filled with seeds, as you can see here. And these pods just open up, the seeds fall to the ground, and next year there will be okra everywhere again. So if you followed along on the garden tours this year, you will remember that down there on the other side of the bean trellis, I had okra plants all over the place, and that every one of those was volunteers from last year, and I had actually removed a ton of them. So yeah, okra is definitely a volunteering sort of plant, and once you plant it, you'll probably see it again. Alright, there you can see my Gallardia flowers. These are just beautiful flowers, and they are all going to seed. You can see all of these heads that are just filled with seeds. So this is a perennial. It'll come back next year, and what I've been doing, this is actually a native type of plant, and so I've been coming out here and grabbing these heads that are full of seeds, and I've actually been tossing them out in the areas that we have around the edges of the orchard area, and any place that we've just let it go naturally, and I've been tossing these seeds out here to try to encourage more wildflowers to grow. Hi, Nubsy. You joining me on the garden tour? Hi, buddy. Alright, down in here, this was oregano. And this was oregano that I planted last year, and it overwintered great. It came back, and once again, I'll just leave it there so that there will always be oregano. And then there are the bean trellises. Now these were the Chinese noodle beans. I grew these last year, grew them this year, and as you can see, it got to the point where we just could not keep up with them all. And so we just kind of let a lot of them go to seed, and all of these long beans that are dried up are filled with basically beans that we could plant again next year. And you can't really see it from here, but on the other trellis there's also Chinese noodle beans. That is the trellis that I planted them on last year, and there was a couple of Chinese noodle bean plants that just came back on their own. And so again, these grew fantastic, even though I really suffered with the pest problems this year. And just like last year, I didn't think I would get any, and then they proved me wrong. Alright, down here we've got more Tulsi Basil. This is where the watermelon was. I got lots of Jubilee watermelons out of this. It was delicious. And the plants are actually still trying to flower, but it's much too late. Even though they're flowering, we're not going to get any watermelons. We are actually supposed to be getting very close to freezing temperatures soon, so pretty much everything that's out here is going to be winding down. Now this brings me over here to the big bed that I put in this year. My great disappointment. One of the disappointments, but it's just, that's what makes gardening a challenge. If it all worked out perfectly, it wouldn't be fun. So I put this bed in here. You can see the great big wall of trellis, and I was so excited to just have tons of green beans that I could can this year. And I planted it, everything was doing great, it was coming up beautifully. I had like 2 big long rows of these beautiful little baby bean plants, and then something happened. Something was eating them, and I couldn't figure out what it was. At first I thought, well, maybe it's grasshoppers, because I had been noticing a lot of grasshoppers. They were really like crazy this year. However, I never saw any out here on the bean plants. And then I figured it out. I was out here walking through trying to, again, look for some sort of pest with 6 legs and antennas, only to discover something else. Rabbit droppings. Last winter we came out here, or I came out here, and I cleared all around the fence and I attached rabbit fencing all along the bottom to keep the rabbits out. All summer long, all spring, all summer, I never had a rabbit get in here. They have found a way. And I think the issue is that rabbit fencing only goes up so high, and then the openings are the same as the typical fencing that is around here, which means about a foot or so up off of the ground, there's holes that rabbits can fit through, and they just didn't figure it out until recently, just in time to eat all my bean plants. So this coming winter, when everything has died back, I will come through here, clean off the fence line again, and this time I will put maybe some chicken wire type fencing all the way around and make it taller so that the rabbits can't just scoot on over through the fence and get in here, because this was a great disappointment. But it is what it is. Rabbits get hungry too. So now this little bed right down here is what my zucchini was growing in. It was the zucchini bed. I have grown zucchini here twice now. Last year my issue was squash bugs. You're always going to have the squash bugs when you grow any kind of squash. But this year was the very first year I have ever seen squash vine borers. So I have done squash here 2 years in a row. Next year I will not plant squash here. I will grow something else over here, and I will put zucchini in another area of the garden. Now this raised bed over here, I had grown tomatoes up on this trellis. They did great, but I had also planted, as you can see, basil around the tomato plants. And while the tomatoes are long gone, the basil has gone crazy. So I planted licorice basil, purple opal basil. This is the classic Genovese basil. Over there I have more of the same, as well as some orange zinnias, the queen lime orange zinnias that are still hanging on and still providing color over there. So this bed has just seriously turned into a giant basil bed. And then this one over here was all peppers, and again, I planted peppers here last year. I planted them this year. They did great both years, but next year I'll probably switch it up, and I don't think I'll plant peppers here. I'll move them to a different location, maybe move peppers over to this one and put some tomatoes in that one. Just kind of swap them up a little bit. And you can see a lot of the pepper plants are beginning to struggle, especially this one right here. The pests have been getting in here, and it's also been getting very, very cold. So they're really starting to struggle. This was that jigsaw pepper with the beautiful purple tricolored leaves. So they're very cool. I don't know that I'll grow them again. I think, you know, yes, they have tons of these little spicy peppers, but I really see these more as an ornamental type of a plant. So I don't know that I'll grow those again. And they were very difficult. I planted a bunch of seeds, and I only ended up getting a couple plants out of all of them. So I do still have some peppers to come out here and harvest. I might get just a couple more harvests before the cold weather just does these in. These right here are Paprika Peppers. These are a loose shower. And with the weather turning colder, you can see my peppers are actually ripening much sooner because they're smaller. All of the peppers are finishing up at much smaller sizes. So I think that the colder weather definitely plays a role in that. But I will be coming out here and harvesting as many peppers as I can. over the next couple of days between this bed and the other one out front, and just appreciating every one of them that I can get, because time is definitely running out on the peppers. Alright, so here you can see I'm now outside the garden fence, and I'm over in the corner where the compost piles are. And the compost piles are just a mess. I did not turn them properly as I ought to this year. They just became overgrown. They're a nightmare. And so I actually plan on this winter, when it's cool enough and not buggy, coming over here and actually moving the compost piles. So I want to move the compost from being inside the corner of the garden to on the outside, probably over here somewhere. And I'm gonna make the bin areas of sorts larger. And the reason I want to do that is I want to be able to bring my tractor over here, take the bucket, scoop it all up, and stir it, and just make life easier. So that is the plan. But do you see what's behind me? Now, I grew Loofa Gourds out in the front garden last year. I had loofahs everywhere, but the cold weather came too soon, and so I wasn't able to really harvest them and use them as I ought. I did have a video where I had shown how to harvest and clean them and all of that so that you could use the loofahs, except I accidentally deleted the footage. It happens. So I had cleaned up the gardens and thrown a bunch of stuff in here, and clearly there were some loofahs in there because the Loofa Gourds grew. Now, the front garden, I had, of course, loofah vines everywhere. I did not have a single blossom until the very end when I was cleaning it all out. And that was in September, which was far too late for anything to do any good. So I never saw a single loofah, not a baby loofah. I didn't see anything. But look what I got over here. And yet, over here in the compost area, the completely neglected, totally left on its own, never watered, never done anything, what do I see? There's loofahs. Now, they're not big, they're kind of puny. And yeah, that's, you can see right there, that is actually the hot wire for the top of my fence, but I just turned the box off so I could come over here and not zap myself. Yeah, there's loofahs. There are loofahs all over the place in here. And I see one in here. It's actually got a little bit of a size to it. Look at that. Although none of these are really going to be big enough that I'll be able to do anything with. But look at them all in there. They're all over the place. And you know, I have to say that seeing all of these Loofa Gourds growing from the compost, totally on their own, totally just, you know, utterly neglected, it makes me wonder if Loofa isn't sort of like tomatoes, where if the soil is too rich, they won't produce fruit. Because, you know, I planted the other Loofa in those big, beautiful raised beds with all of the healthy soil and all of that, and I didn't get anything. Just lots and lots of greenery. So I'm thinking that next year, when I plant Loofa, and I will plant Loofa again, I am determined, I will plant them someplace that has less optimal soil and see if that doesn't make a difference. Because clearly, if they're just left to their own devices, they seem to do better than if you maintain them beautifully. And I will add that while none of the Loofa are big enough that I could actually harvest them as Loofa, and I'm talking about the scrubby things you use in the shower or scrubbing dishes with, smaller ones, like this one or this one right here, these are actually edible, and you can slice them up and put them in soup like you would squash. Look at this. Just look at this. Not a single loofah in the garden, but they're all over the place in the compost pile. So yeah, I will definitely completely rethink how I do the loofah next year, and hopefully we'll be more successful. Oh, and I forgot to show you something in there. So I forgot to show you out here by my sad bean trellis attempt. Over here on the side, I had planted some cabbages. I have 3 cabbages that are doing great. The ones down in here, clearly the rabbits ate, but then I have this. So this is tatsoi, and I'm super excited about this. I'm actually going to be starting to harvest some of this. It is a beautiful green, Chinese, I believe, and I grew a couple of these in the spring. Only one of them thrived, and it got eaten by a pest. So this will be my first actual attempt at trying out the tatsoi and seeing how it tastes. I mean, it's beautiful. This is actually 2 of them kind of growing together. So they're kind of clamshelled, but they have that beautiful rosette shape. So yeah, we'll be trying these very soon. All right, so there's just a couple things I'm going to show you out here in the front raised bed garden. In this bed right here, all of those down there are actually broccoli, and then these 2 right here are Brussels sprouts. And I'm going to leave this trellis up in here, the center one, for the time being, because at some point I am going to need to cover these for the colder temperatures, and I can use the trellis to use clothespins and hold up the cover to protect these from the cold weather. Because here in Alabama, I can leave these out here all winter long. They will be just fine as long as I cover them up to protect them from extreme cold and like hard freezes. They'll do just fine in there. The basil, the purple basil, that'll all die off, but those brassicas will do great. I've got some thyme down in here that I planted. This is German winter thyme, which you can see right down in here. This great big trellis right here is where I had the loofah plants again this year. I grew loofah on it last year. This year I had loofah on that side, and I had the Kajari melons on this side. The Kajari melons are delicious, but I will give them their own dedicated trellis to grow on next year. This trellis will probably come down. I don't know if I will keep that there next year. I definitely won't be growing the loofah out here, so I'll just have to think about it and think what I want to do with that trellis. Over in the long bed here, I've got cabbages, and I have some herbs that do well here generally throughout the winter, like the sage, the garden sage I have there. And then this right here is the beautiful pineapple sage, and this is one of those plants that tells you it really is the end of summer and that autumn has actually arrived, because these beautiful red flowers only come at the very end of summer. And I love that pineapple smell is just amazing. Over here we've got cinnamon basil that's still hanging on. I just let it go to flower. Right in here I've got some more cabbages. These are a fast growing, it's supposed to be 45-day cabbage. Over there you can see the tricolored sage that I planted back in the spring. It didn't really do much of anything all summer because it had zero sun. It was just buried by all of the tomato plants, but now that it has sunlight and it's more exposed, it is actually finally taking off. This is oregano, which I planted last year. It does fantastic. I can come out here all winter long and pick fresh oregano. This is a pile of Tulsi Basil, still going strong, still going to seed, and still creating volunteers. And then this right here, I'm so happy to see. This is some more yarrow that has flowered. This is a pink variety. Over there, I've got more peppers, lots and lots of peppers. Again, the peppers are reaching their end. I will harvest every bit that I possibly can and preserve as much as I can before the cold weather does the plants in. This bed down here was all pretty much flowers and still hanging on, still doing what it can. The beautiful dahlias, these mystic, what are they called? They were mystic something. I forget now. But these have begun flowering again. They kind of stopped in the extreme heat, but now they are back showing their beauty. Now these particular dahlias, when I planted them and I read about the information that came with them, it said that they are not hardy for our temperatures during the winter, so that anything below 8, you really need to dig them up and winter them someplace a little bit more sheltered. So these ones, I am definitely going to come out here and I will dig up the root ball and all of that and just store it away for winter and then replant it in the spring, and then hopefully I will have those gorgeous dahlias every year. And then last but not least is this bed right here. This is the newest raised bed that I put in this year, and I used that very easy castle block system. The whole bed goes together in just minutes. Now this garden bed, I didn't plant until the very end of summer because it is all root vegetables, and these root vegetables just do not like the extreme temperatures that we get here in Alabama. They don't do well, they won't germinate well when it's 95 plus degrees. And so I had come out here, we'd had some cooler temperatures, and I thought it was the perfect time to come out here and plant. And so I planted all of these. Everything was coming up. I had little baby carrots everywhere. And then the heat came back and almost all of them died. So you can see some bigger ones right here in the middle. They were pretty hardy. Those are the black nebula carrots. And so a lot of those survived, but pretty much everything else I had to replant because they just got cooked in the heat. I had put a shade cover over it, but it just wasn't enough. And so I don't know if you can see it, but I do actually have baby carrots. There's baby turnips, parsnips, some radishes. They're all through here now. I have really struggled trying to grow carrots, and it kills me because years ago I grew them in a flower box and I had carrots galore, and I didn't know anything about gardening back then. And then we moved here and I've tried growing carrots repeatedly and just not had any luck. So this year it looks like, fingers are crossed, that I will get some carrots. So I'm learning, always learning. Alright you guys, so that is the last official garden tour of the 2020 garden season. There will be times, I'm sure, where I will come out here and share little updates here and there on things such as the cabbage, the broccoli and Brussels sprouts and all of that, and just kind of see how they're doing throughout the course of winter. But that is the last full tour. It's been another great year. Once again, there were challenges. Once again, there were learning opportunities, and I will do a separate video and talk about all of the mistakes from this year and what I'm going to do about them for next year. But it gives me so much joy to get out here and sweat and work and watch things grow. And then the harvest comes and there's all of those things that fill the freezer, fill the canning jars, fill our plates and bowls. it is so worth it and is so rewarding, and it's just nourishing. It's nourishing to the body and it's nourishing to the soul. So thanks for coming on the journey with me again this year. I am already working on my plans for next year. I can't wait. But first, there will be a season of rest. Rest for the garden, rest for the bodies. So that is it. Thanks for hanging out with me here and coming along on the gardening journey. My name is Constance from Cosmopolitan Cornbread, and I'll talk to y'all next time.